Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm David Asman in this week for Paul Gigot. Well, as inflation continues to climb and COVID infections continue to surge, President Biden's poll numbers continue to fall, with just 33% of Americans approving of the job he's doing. That new low coming as the president scrambles to contain the fallout from his handling of the economy and the coronavirus pandemic. We begin with the economy as Americans face soaring prices and empty shelves. Inflation jumping 7% in December from a year ago. This is the fastest pace since 1982, as consumers pay more for everything from gasoline to groceries, you name it. Those rising costs reduced real wages by 2.4% in 2021 as the average American worker took a pay cut. Let's bring in our panel. We have Wall Street Journal columnist Dan Henninger and Kim Strassel and editorial board member Kyle Peterson. Good to see you all. Dan, first to you. You know, even some Democrats are now admitting that inflation is getting worse and it's not going to get better this year. We have James Furman, who was in the Obama administration, an economist, saying expect the economy to experience elevated inflation this year, possibly even higher than in 2021. What does that tell you? The Dems are saying it's going to be higher.
Well, it tells me that a serious economist like Jason Furman realizes the economic reality that is in front of all of our faces. You know, and that reality is, David, that the Biden administration last year basically tried to make a deal with the inflation devil. And that deal was this. They put through trillions of dollars in stimulus spending last year, above and beyond what was already being spent by the federal government. Their argument was that because of pandemic, the spending was necessary. The fact is, they injected a lot of money into the economy. And when you do that, most economists understand you are running the risk of an inflationary spike. That spike is here now. The most serious economic way to counteract something like that is by raising interest rates. But this Federal Reserve under Jerome Powell has refused to do that. And now the Biden administration has to deal with the inflation that we're experiencing right now. And like all administrations, they try to talk it down with Band-Aids, jawboning meat producers, shipping producers. It never works. Yeah. The inflation that they've created is real, and they now are going to have to deal with the political consequences.
And Kim, there are signs that it is going to get worse. We had wholesale prices up 9.7%, very close to double-digit inflation. That eventually is passed on to retailers, which is passed on to consumers, meaning all of our prices are going higher. But the White House is in denial. Listen to what the president said on the day the CPI numbers came out on Wednesday. The president put out a statement saying, "We are making progress in slowing the rate of price increases." Kind of scary when you see denial like that.
Yeah, and it's not even true, because if you strip out some of the more volatile prices in those numbers, like for food and energy, it actually did increase month on month. And so he didn't even get that right. But look, Dan gave the important word, denial. And what's really scary about this is we know this playbook. We know what happens when presidents are in denial. This is what happened in the 1970s. The Keynesians were in charge. They flooded the economy with a lot of money. Inflation started going up. They blamed everyone, pointed fingers at big business. They blamed supply chains. Does all this sound familiar? But what the Democrats really ought to be worried about is that the end of that playbook was obviously a voting public that got completely sick of it, elected more Republicans, and ultimately put Ronald Reagan in office.
Yeah, and Kyle, you know, beyond the blame game, they actually came out with regulations that they're proposing for the meat industry, who they claim are responsible for inflation for the meat that you buy, and of course, a lot more regulations for energy producers in the United States. That turns into extra costs, and that rises inflation even more.
Right. And the story is that they've been telling for months is that these are just supply chain issues. But the two numbers from the recent release, the December release that stuck out to me, were transportation services and shelter were up more than 4%. Well, your transportation services and your shelter are not stuck in the port of LA somewhere trying to get to you. And so I think there's more coming. Kevin Hassett, I'll cite another economist. He's a guy who worked for President Trump, so other side of the aisle. He's saying that he's worried we're going to see double-digit inflation in 2022. And if we hit that going into the November elections, I think Biden has a huge problem on his hands.
Yeah, and Dan, Kyle just alluded to it, but empty shelves. I mean, the worst of both worlds, not only higher prices, but fewer goods. I mean, of course, some of it can be blamed on the pandemic, on Omicron. Some of it can be blamed on the supply chain crisis, but it all falls on Biden's watch.
It does, David. And I think the one thing we should quickly also point out is their policies last year included significant distortions of the labor market, specifically such as the unemployment insurance bonus that they gave people.
Yep.
They would argue it was necessary. The fact is, between the bonuses, the stimulus spending, a lot of people dropped out of the labor market. And now the story of the moment is that so many companies, such as shipping, are finding difficulty getting people to come back to work. Yes, COVID has something to do with that. But the fact is they did distort labor markets in a way that is exacerbating the inflation that we're experiencing right now. And really, it's difficult to see them digging out from under this before November's elections.
Yeah, 11 to 12 million unfilled jobs in this country, and that's why employers are going nuts trying to find workers to do the work.